All right. Welcome back, everybody. All praises be to the Creator. We are back once again, 2 nights in a row, right? And on the topic, they like, Sister Amuna, you just found out about this topic. I'm going to take you guys along a little journey. Thank you for those who just subscribed. The new subscribers, it's been a long day, so I'm not camera ready right now, the bright lights and all that good stuff. And plus, I have some treats for you. This is a little bit of preliminaries. Yesterday, I showed you a lot of books um, and a lot of research. And sometimes research can be overwhelming, right? And sometimes we don't know how to approach it or from what angle to approach something. And then it becomes so overwhelming that, some of us just walk away and kind of believe anything that we may be hearing someone says if it sounds like they're putting it together well, right? I'm the type, I don't know, I get a little bit, I don't want to say obsessed. It depends on the subject matter. But tonight I'm going to show you just a little bit about how I do like my preliminary research to determine whether or not something's going to be worth my time to dig into. Because so if you come on the channel and see the research that I was doing on R. Kelly, it's still going on, you know what I mean? But it's not like, ooh, 2 nights worth of research and I'm here. Sometimes I do preliminary research and see if there's any value in me digging into certain spaces to get understanding because we can't know everything, okay? But this ADOS, after I had the conversation yesterday and I saw some comments in the comment section, I decided to continue to learn a little bit more. The website was put up there for me to take a look at. So today I had a little time. Like they say, I had some time today. And so I went back and began to listen to who I'm hearing as the progenitors of the movement. Went back to listen to some of the messages that came out concerning the misconceptions of the movement and just the energy. You know what I'm saying? I'm an energetic person, just to hear the energy and the delivery of those who have been propagating this thought process, okay? Because again, everybody can have their opinions, but you want to go to the source. From there, I listen to some of the proponents, some of the supporters, and some of the dissidents. Okay, I'm gonna pull up my screen so you can just walk with me a little bit on some of the preliminary research. And why I say this is important is because we historically have been a people who usually kind of go with stuff that feels good, or and because it feels good, we kind of lean towards making whatever material we see fit our narrative. Now, I don't know how historically accurate this will be, or genuine it will be, but this is what for the oftentimes we've been known to do, or even people in general. I'm gonna pull up my screen. This is preliminary research, what's behind the numbers, historical context. One of the things that I heard was about not having a place to return to call one's own, and not being necessarily accepted in other countries. And this is why there's a rejection of Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism is not going to fit the need, and it's not mutual, meaning, and let me know if you are part of the movement, let me know if I'm getting it wrong. If you go to other countries, you're not necessarily going to get the benefits that those melanated people in their countries get. And so there's kind of a bit of resentment and indifference to the fact that there are people coming from other countries, Caribbean, South America, and on the continent that are reaping the benefits of those who were here. And the thought processes, which to me, I would love to have a dialogue. The thought processes either that the people who are taking other people's benefits, and I even heard the thought process of stealing people's benefits. I would like to hear more. I would like to hear that thought develop a little more. But in my research, I came across, and this is the stuff we have to have a bit of patience for. I came across a few videos. So let me go ahead and pull this up on my screen. Why is this important? I'll tell you in a little bit. Okay. So one of the first things that I saw, or a few things that I saw, but one of the things that I saw was a conversation of will Pookie and Ray Ray become the face of ADOS? And it was a question talking about, as it says, Yvette Carnell in Tone Talks, ADOS movement gets bigger, will Pookie and Ray Ray cause problems? So it's kind of like this parody, but a genuine concern of who's going to be the chosen spokesperson, and whether or not, see, there's another video, should Pookie and Ray Ray get reparations? You know, and so these are all these questions surrounding now that the people have been redefined. The people who gives the definition for someone then gets to determine who fits and who doesn't fit in that category. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, that determination and how it is expected to work given the history of this country. And some of the things that I'm hearing, I'm like, historically, I'm not sure if that's pretty accurate, but we're going to continue. So that was one of the things I came across. As you see, I watched a number of these videos. What's the problem? Black people. I went back and listened to ADOS Explained. I went back and listened to a number of things. Okay, not all, but just to kind of get a clearer picture of what I'm listening to or what's actually going on before I, invest any more time or just leave it alone. Okay, so that's Pookie and Ray Ray. And then this particular video here, ADOS Pushback, I watched. This was one of the last ones that I watched. And I thought it was interesting. But like I said before, I like to read comments. So in the comments section, couple that with whether or not Pookie and Ray Ray are entitled to reparations. Hold on, let me close this here. I was scrolling down the pushback video and I came across a lot of, I can see why people are saying that there's a possibility, even if the intent is not divisiveness. I can see that there's a lot of resentment and indifference being spewed in the comment section. It's comment section, like that's data right there. That's intel. That's straight from the source. You know what I mean? So what sometimes when we overlook comment sections, we're not realizing like this is like surveying people to find out their inner thoughts and what's really going on with them on a topic. It's very valuable information. So on this particular one, I got a lead. Marty Williams. For those who just joined us, we are going over behind the numbers. On this one, I was going through and I was reading the back and forth. And then I came to a point where Marty Williams drops to Master D an article. Have a look at this article. Miami Color of Wealth report shows staggering gap in liquid wealth. Native blacks worth $11 and Caribbeans worth $2,000. So this is what the article says. So me being who I am, I'm gonna go ahead and click on article. Okay. So I clicked on the article, Electric Urban Report, Lee Bailey's Euroweb.com. Miami Color of Wealth report shows staggering gap in liquid wealth. Native blacks worth $11, Caribbean worth $2,000. Okay, off the bat, this would prove or support one's claims, right? So this was published yesterday at 4:57 in the a.m. Okay, so we got to look at all of what's going on and understand how media plays a role in substantiating a predetermined thought. You have to keep all of those things in mind. Okay. So we have like some scanty looking change here. That's you pick to paint the picture. All right. And it's interesting that one of the supporters is the one who said, yo, go read this article. And this article just dropped. So the person said that 3 hours ago because this article just dropped the day before. Hold on one second. So I'm going to read the article. Hopefully you can see it on the screen. It's short. It says the new Color of Wealth report evaluating the city of Miami, Florida, has just been released, and it shows some interesting data, to say the least. Okay. It says the report showed an overwhelming large gap in wealth held by white residents of Miami when compared to others. Okay. It goes on to say, white household median net worth was estimated $107,000. Native Black American household median net worth was $3,700. Black Carib households median net worth was $12,000. Cuban household median net worth was $22,000. So one would say that Native Black, which would be ADOS in my estimation, right, based on what I'm hearing the definition, is at median net worth is at $3,000. Okay, and Black Caribbean households is at $12,000. To my understanding, would that both be under the poverty level? That's just a question, but that It says here, effective mirroring the national gap in wealth whites hold over blacks. Yet where the report got even more interesting is the gap in wealth between native Black Americans and Caribbeans. I don't know why that would be more interesting than the other things, but again, you have to look at the spin on the article and the way that the story is being framed. Yet even more interesting, that means there is, even though people are saying that there's not a divisiveness happening, this very article, or the writer of this article, let's go back and see who the writer of the article is. It doesn't say, which I find interesting. The article doesn't have a name on it, okay? We're going to continue though, because again, it's a spin. It says even more interesting is in the gap in wealth between native Black Americans and Caribbeans. The middle ADOS, so it's using the vernacular of the movement, or native Black family was found to hold a mere $11 liquid cash stocks, while the middle Caribbean family in Miami had $2,000 liquid, meaning Caribbeans in Miami hold a staggering 180 times the liquid wealth that American descendants of slavery. Listen to the way even the first paragraph is being framed. Okay. One of the founders of the movement, now it goes on to quote, so you have the facts that are shining a certain light to substantiate a thought process. This is my preliminary, this is my preliminary research by just listening to those who are talking about it and some of their talking points. One of the founders of the movement, ADOS, or American Descendants of Slavery, Yvette Carnell, had this to say about the report's findings. Quote, this only further demonstrates the cost of American slavery isn't held in families based on their complexion, but is based on lineage that roots itself in coming from American chattel slavery. Let me read that again. This only further demonstrates the cost of American slavery isn't held in families based on their complexion, but is based on a lineage that roots itself in coming from American chattel slavery. Lastly, it says, the picture of Blackness is getting clearer as reports tell us more of the gaping differences between groups within race. While it is still clear white America holds an overwhelming majority of the wealth, these reports are showing it's not enough to just say we're all doing the same in America due to Blackness. So again, very, very interesting. Now, to read the full findings, you're going to find the full findings here at this article, which was within it. So if you go back to where I clicked on this link here, I did read the article and I put a question up there. But before I get to my question, the color of wealth in Miami. Hold on, I was trying to log in from my phone to see if anybody had any questions. But hold on one moment. This is just preliminary research, y'all. The color of wealth in Miami. Okay. And it tells you what's a publication. It tells you who did it. Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State University, Samuel Du Bois Cook Center, Social Equity at Duke University, the Inside Center for Community Economic Development. Okay. Hold on 1 second. Oh, come on. Okay. Okay. So this is the article that headline came from and that it was spinned from. So like I said, some of the things that are being said are, your bones are not buried here. You didn't have any investment in this country if you came from the Caribbean. These are a lot of the things that are being said. This is why I said yesterday, if we're going to make such claims, then we have to be rooted in history and be able to substantiate the things that we're saying, okay? So this is just in a short review of the article. This is 2019, so this just came out, okay? So keep that in mind. And I put all the links in the box. So it gives all the acknowledgments, this, that, and the third. It tells you what it's going to go into. It tells you the methodology. It tells you asset, debt, net worth. So it's not only liquid assets that it looked at. And you will see in certain places within this study that so-called ADOS, melanated people, that's classified as ADOS, surpass so-called Caribbean people in certain areas. So again, I find it interesting that in one area one chooses to look at, then you're going to sign these disparaging numbers and say, aha, right? If we're going to give the people information, then we should give the people all the information. So basically the abstract, which I'm not going to read all, I did it on my other computer and it highlighted the places that I wanted to go, but on this computer, for some reason, it's not highlighted, so you're going to have to rock with me a little bit. But the overall abstract is income and wealth inequality in the United States, especially across racial and ethnic groups, is dramatic and persistent. While income is often used by researchers, practitioners, advocates, and policymakers to describe local economic condition and drive policy decisions, it also increasingly is recognized as an inadequate indicator of economic well-being, mobility, and security. Wealth is generally less volatile than income, and it provides a store of resources that give families security during emergencies and allows them to secure advantages that foster the well-being of the next generation. We've seen a situation like this in Katrina, where some people couldn't afford, in the case of that emergency, to leave the city, and they had to make choices that they wouldn't have otherwise made if they had access to capital, right? So we understand that having money on hand and liquid assets is important, because if not, then you're going to be put in compromising situations. I'm going to go ahead, and again, I put it in the box. It tells you who he's talking about. It's talking about so-called whites, Latinas, U.S. descendants of blacks, or ADOS, as it is termed, Caribbean so-called blacks, I don't like that term, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, South Americans, X, Y, and Z, okay? It tells you when the data was collected. It was collected in Miami between 2013 and 2014. For Greater Miami, include asset and debt information on several disaggregated groups, thereby improving understanding of key disparities in income, wealth, right? And they compare and contrast all throughout this study, okay? Okay, so one of the things that was pulled out before we get to the median value, the median wealth for white households, or so-called, was estimated at 107,000, which is interesting, first of all. How many people have been to Miami? That's also interesting. But anywho, in contrast, Puerto Rican households had negative median wealth. Negative 3,940. How do you have a negative median wealth? But I'll continue. South Americans and U.S. blacks, so-called blacks, had a fraction of the wealth of white households at 1,200 and 3,700 respectively. So South Americans had 1,200, and they're saying that U.S. quote-unquote blacks have 3,700 respectively. Other Latinas and Caribbean so-called blacks were slightly better off with a median of 10,500 and 12,000 respectively. All of this sounds like poverty, but I'll continue. Of all groups, apart from non-Latino whites, Cuban households had the highest median wealth at 22,000. Okay, we're going to continue. This is the number that was chosen to be picked out of the entire study, and I wonder why. The median value of liquid assets for the U.S. so-called blacks and Puerto Ricans were only 11 and 200 respectively. So this is interesting. The number before said that the Puerto Rican had a negative median wealth of negative 3,940, but the number after it says that the liquid assets in the U.S. for melanated people is 11, and the liquid assets is 200 respectively. So it would seem to me that the compare and contrast, given that in the second paragraph, Puerto Ricans and U.S. melanated people are compared and contrast, then why would one jump directly to the second line, which compare and contrasts South American and Caribbean melanated people? But I'll continue. The median value of liquid assets among Caribbean so-called blacks and South Americans were 2,000, and for Cubans, it was 3,200. It goes on. But again, like I'm saying, if we're looking at the numbers, we can't just pull out one number and say, hey, liquid assets is such and such. We have to look at all of the different places where they're comparing and contrasting, because what you're going to find in most spaces is a belief systems. You're going to look at spending habits. You're going to look at the different ways in which the people socialize and how they interface and interact with their monies. Once again, at this point, the Puerto Ricans and the melanated people of the Americas are being put into the same category and being compared and contrasted. I'll continue. It says, I'll jump down. This is just preliminary. This is just preliminary. These are just some of my preliminary findings that make me go, Okay, listen to this. Again, this is another thing about habit. This is if you look at earlier on in this country, when what was the name of the when it was the Freedmen's Bureau, right? Earlier on in this country, when slavery was so-called abolished, and a lot of people were taking advantage and exploiting the melanated person. When it came onto banking, when it came onto insurances, they were taking out insurance and they were taking out bank. What was the name of the bank? I have to go back in my memory to get that, because y'all know I don't like pulling stuff that I can't remember. But I can remember the overarching theme was that people were robbed and not compensated for the monies that they invested. Okay. And so there's a distrust to a certain degree that you may see represented in some of these numbers in 2013 and 2014. There are large disparities in checking and saving account access between so-called whites and other racial groups. Okay, so this also has to do with the trust factor of those who you're giving your money to. U.S. melanated people are 57%. Caribbean melanated people are 71% of checking and savings accounts. Puerto Ricans are at 69, South Americans are at 76.9, and other Hispanics are at 66.2. It says are far less likely to own checking accounts than their European counterparts, 93.2. I wonder why other Europeans may be more comfortable with putting their monies in the bank than other nationalities, or even those who were here in this land longer and had more experience with the system. All right, I'm going to jump down. All of these things are just small things that jump out to me that we can't just pull out a number out of a 60-page report without reading the report, or at least honestly reporting some of the other data that's in this report. Okay. Look at the household. These are just some of the overviews. When it comes to retirement assets, you have the types of investments were significantly lower among the Puerto Ricans, who are 13%, 11% U.S. blacks, so-called blacks, and 9% Caribbean melanated people. So when it comes on to retirement assets and investing their stuff there, you see Caribbean melanated people ranking lower, and then you see Puerto Rican, who was at a negative earlier, ranking higher. What's really going on here? It says these low level of retirement savings suggest a high reliance on Social Security income for retirement. And then it looks at credit card debt. But okay, so these are some of the things, like I said, that popped up to me, but I'm gonna continue for the sake of time, right? You could definitely click on it and read it at your own discretion. Concerning, you don't belong here, or you didn't sweat here, or I found that particularly interesting, but I'm going to go to that because it's actually noted in the report, and this is what I named this particular video after. Hold on one second. Hold on. What's behind the numbers? Historical content, right? So this is, again, like I'm sharing with you, this is preliminary research. Sometimes we're too quick to just listen to what someone is saying and not go do the back research so that we can get understanding. And then you have people out there who will put out a video to say, I wonder if Pookie or Ray Ray is going to be the face, because it feels good, it sounds good, and then people are more likely going to go with it without, going behind the person to make sure that the motives are good, make sure the intentions are clear. You know what I mean? What's behind the note? I'm not saying yes, or I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that particular article that just came out, it was slanted. It was greatly slanted. It was doing the gangster to me. Okay. So what's behind the numbers? Historical context. To understand the distinctive characteristics, we're talking about South Florida. We're talking about Miami in particular. To understand the distinctive characteristics of South Florida's communities of color, right? This is what we're looking for, understanding. because we use the number coming out of Miami, so we must understand the demographic of Miami and the history, right? Communities of color with respect to household wealth, because this is what we're talking about. It is critical. It is critical. It is critical to understand key economic and demographic changes that transformed, that means they were on at the ground floor, the region into its current global city status. Listen good now. The region has a long history of flows of people, goods, and capital between the mainland United States and the Caribbean region. A long history of which we're going to touch a little bit on in a minute. Once primarily a retirement area with a small tourist industry that relied largely on Jim Crow. Remember, some of this time period goes from slavery to Jim Crow to that's to my understanding. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, right? It says once primarily a retirement area with a small tourist industry that relied largely on Jim Crow enforced, poorly paid African American / Afro Caribbean labor. The region's rapid population growth over the past 50 years has been largely attributed to immigration from the Caribbean and Central and South America. I'm going to jump down because somebody might say, Amuna, that's just 50 years, you tripping, right? This is why I say we're going to research. I'm going to jump down right here. Miami's beginning, rooted in Black labor and political participation. Black American, Bahamian, that's the Caribbean, and other Afro-Caribbean groups with histories rooted in the US and Caribbean slave experience defined much of Miami's early history. Miami's Coconut Grove neighborhood, the first Black community in South Florida, was settled by Bahamians in the 1880s. Remember, so-called slavery ended when? 1865. If I'm not mistaken, 1880s is around, let me not lie. When is the time of Reconstruction? Hold on one second. Hold on. Oh, radical started in 1867. Reconstruction, because this is the time of, we could just go check. Let me make sure. This is Jim Crow, 1865, period of Southern Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, introduced a new set. So we're on the time after slavery, okay? And 3 years, this is the first part of the period, and Florida is in the South, okay? And so they're coming in on the back part of when Reconstruction. I have to go see and do some more research on how long this thing goes. But we have Bahamians actually being the founders of Miami's Coconut Grove neighborhood, the first Black community in South Florida. Okay, that would mean that they would have endured some things. Hold on one second. Black males registered voters were used to achieve the required numbers of voters needed to incorporate the new city of Miami in 1896. This is in the same report. That's the same report that was quoted in this article that turns around to say that we need to compare the melanated experience from the Caribbean to the melanated experience on America because they're not the same, and you're coming to steal my resources. So here we are in the very same article that came out this year that's saying, let me read that again. Black male registered voters were used to achieve the required number of voters needed to incorporate the new city of Miami in 1896, but later disenfranchised. These immigrants brought a range of skills, and many of the cultural landmarks and industries in Miami were built with their labor. So that intrigued me. So I was like, oh, okay, let me see what's going on here. So I jump on over. I say that to say we have to educate ourselves, right? We have to. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna come over here and read y'all. I'm gonna read y'all I'm gonna read your comments. All I'm saying is people, I'm watching the comment boards and reading what people are saying and pointing to whatever it is and this and that and to make their case. And all I'm saying is that as we're doing that, we have to be careful that we're not misinforming people who may not have been there when the idea was being hatched. We always have to be cognizant that we're not misinforming people by the way in which we're painting the narrative or the way in which we're allowing the narrative to be painted. So this is for those who possibly may be confused because of the way in which the Caribbean migration, and then I'll come to the comment section. The journey of Afro-Caribbean peoples to the United States started long ago, when enslaved Barbadians were taken by their British owners to South Carolina during the 17th century, because the reality is, as it has been stated, that a large majority of the slaves that came to the continental US were first come through the Caribbean. And so then you began to have a number of them transported from the Caribbean to the mainland, especially after slavery was then abolished, so-called the transatlantic slave trade in 1808. Indeed, most of the earliest Africans to arrive in what would become the United States were seasoned men, women, and children from the Caribbean. That means your brother could have been here and your uncle came over. Your mother could have been left back and your sister came over. The first involuntary migration, followed by a large influx of people from the British West Indies at the turn of the 20th century. A third wave of immigrants arrived between 1930 and 1965. And a fourth wave, a movement, is still going on today. The impact of these migrations upon American society, and especially upon African America, has been profound. Immigrants, I heard something to the effect of, you can't talk about one or two Caribbean families when you have names like Stokely Carmichael, or you have names like Marcus Garvey, and then the thought is you can't talk about one or two. They founded a whole city in Miami. That's not one or two. That's not one or two. I'm not saying that people can't do what it is that they need to do. All I'm saying is, as we're coming forward with this information, let's bring it all out. Immigration from the Spanish-speaking Caribbean started later but grew fast. In the year 2000, more than 5.4 million U.S. residents traced their national origins to Puerto Rico. And you can jump down, but let me jump down. Colonial period to 1900. Caribbeans and African Americans were brought together in Britain's North American colonies in the South as well as in the North. Those enslaved in Barbados, many of them born in Africa, constituted an important portion of the Black so-called population of Virginia and the Chesapeake. And Barbadian interest developed South Carolina, which in the 18th century extended and broadened its trading relations with other Caribbean islands. Jamaica soon surpassed Barbados as a market for Carolinian products. The degree of intercourse between the two areas was enormous, and the significant influence of the Caribbean on South Carolina endures to this day. Did some other people who got dropped off in the Caribbean suffer in the Caribbean and then come to America and suffer too? Question. Well, in the 18th century, the majority of bondsmen in the North had either lived or were born in the Caribbean. In New York, which had the North's largest enslaved population, people from the Caribbean continued to outnumber Africans brought directly from the continent. Although those of West African origin gained a reputation for rebelliousness after a revolt in New York City in 1712, and although laws placed higher duties on them, the imbalance continued. One estimate puts the ratio of Caribbean to African slaves at 3 to 1 between 1715 and 1730. That sounds like during the time of slavery to me. Of captives introduced by New Yorkers between 1715 and 1741, the largest number came from Jamaica, followed by Africa, Barbados, and Antigua. I'm not going to read the whole thing, But I'm doing is looking at what's being said and the mentality and the us against them. This is what I'm receiving just by listening. The way in which the article was spun, it makes me ask questions like, wait a minute, how much of this history, maybe not those who are forwarding the idea, but how much of this history are those who are being who who are in the comment section, who are picking up this thought process? How much of this history do they really know? Caribbean immigrants also figured prominently among the free people in the North. So my point is that Marcus Garvey was not an anomaly. Prince Hall, who was believed to be from Barbados, established so-called Black Freemasonry in the United States and was a distinguished leader of Boston's African American community during the 18th century. As late as 1860, 1 in 5 Black Bostonians had 1860. That's still during slavery, not in the North, but certainly in the South. Is 1 in 5 Bostonians have been born in the Caribbean islands. So in 1822, Denmark Vesey, who was born in Africa or in the Caribbean and had been enslaved in the Virgin Islands and sent to Domingue, organized an elaborate slave uprising in Charleston, South Carolina. It was eventually uncovered before it could be launched. In 1827, John B. Russwurm of Jamaica and his African-American colleague Samuel E. Cornish started Freedom's Journal, the first so-called Black newspaper. So the thought that they didn't labor together and they didn't suffer together, and I don't know where that thought came from. I could be wrong. I'm gonna come to the comment section. But so far, what I'm getting from the comment section and what I'm hearing is some misinformation. Let me go ahead and release my screen here so I can see what is being said. Okay, Chavez says, Amuna, I love your platform. Have been listening for years. You have to look more into Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. Have you read the books, The Color of Law and The Color of Money? No, I haven't read those books as yet. Thank you for those suggestions. But the people that live in the city and the people that live out in the woods would be different. Just like people who live in Macon, Georgia versus NYC or LA, the numbers will be different. The Freedmen's Bank, that's the name of it. Thank you so much. They stole all the Blanks money. So that's what I was bringing that up. And thank you, Chavez. I was bringing that up to show that there is a historical context when we're looking at these numbers. If we're going to quote them, then we have to be honest about what could have been, what could contribute to why we're seeing a difference in numbers from someone who would have experienced what they experienced with the Freedmen Bank stealing their money and not paying out insurance policies. So you might see something different from someone else who did not necessarily have that experience. The link that I supplied is concerned the history of banking on Blacks soon as Reconstruction started. Thank you. I'll share that. You're absolutely correct. I listened to Yvette for almost 4 years. She has done a lot of research to back up her points. I just think you have to look at more than just one article. I'm listening to more than one article, but I'm also listening to the talking points. And correct me if I'm wrong about some of these talking points that I'm hearing. You know what I'm saying? Because they're talking points. So we have to always be cognizant of the talking points that are going out. And the talking points that are going out are what I've heard, even from her own mouth, is that these Caribbean so-called Blacks are coming and taking our opportunities, and they didn't suffer in this land, and they didn't build this land, right? And they're coming and taking that which belongs to us, and so are the African, the Nigerians, and the Ethiopians, and the Ghanaians, right? And they're coming and taking what belongs to us. So in my preliminary research, like I said, I'm like knee deep over here into some what's going on with R. Kelly, but for the sake of discussion, in my preliminary research, based on not what I just wanted to make up, based on what is being given in the comment section by the supporters, this article right here, that was the Miami Color article from the Euroweb, is mad suspect. Whoever wrote this and whose name is not on it, one has to be honest to say, if I go to this report and see that you're trying to paint a narrative of so-called Caribbean Black people against native so-called Black people, and this narrative that you're trying to paint is to support a thought process and the need to give a new designation because others are taking what we have worked for. And I'm saying just based on that alone, going to the actual article or the research study that was told to us to go to, you see indicators that that is not the case. You cannot make a claim that these so-called people from the Caribbean did not help to build America or did not help to suffer in building of America when the history is clearly saying they was here. You know what I mean? So then one has to say, okay, yeah, I'm not talking about down there. I'm not talking about over here. We just read it briefly, and there's way more that I can read. But for the sake of time, I'm just saying if this is the position that's being forwarded, then that position is not 100%. Because they were definitely here before any recent mass migration. That's as to say someone you just, who's going to help me shuck the corn? Not me. Who's going to help me do such and such? Not me. And then all of a sudden, everybody shows up to eat what you did by yourself. That's not accurate. That's not really accurate. They were present here at different times during history and did labor. Now, whether or not someone wants to take it to another level or change the parameters or define it more, I'm not sure. But that particular aspect of what was said is what caught my attention, and that's why I'm just coming with the history. So that's really what I wanted to share, that we are able to take a look at that to see that the very report says they were here. They were here. And they put in time and they put in effort and they put in energy and they put in work. There's a lot of people who lost the fact that, oh, you were first in the Caribbean and then you came here. So maybe you might see a second generation that looks like they were here, but they originally were dropped off in the Caribbean. And like they said, I'll tell you a joke. When they talk about South Carolina, when I first learned about the Gullah Geechee, right? And I was listening to them talk, I was so shocked by the way in which that I could understand what they were saying. I picked the phone up quick and called my mother. I was like, yo, mommy, listen to this, right? And she's listening, and I'm like, tell me what she just said. Because like they say, a lot of this, even the vernacular and a lot of the Caribbean way in which that they speak and the patois are present in the Gullah Geechee. And I can understand everything they're saying. So when you hear talks about people being first, quote, seasoned in the Caribbean islands and then transplanted to America, that's facts. That's facts. So then where do we draw the line? And this is during slavery. This is during slavery. So then we have to say, what time period are we talking about? Because we just read in the 1700s, they were taking people from Jamaica, mainly, and Barbados to do what? To transplant them to South Carolina, which was a hub. I mean, South Carolina was dirty rich, and Savannah, which were ports that were bringing in slaves. So then, this is what I'm talking about when we talk about this stuff. Then we have to get specific, because then we may be in danger of misrepresenting history. Is all I'm saying. I put all the links in the box. Those are my preliminary thoughts. I'll just keep doing the research and keep sharing, the things that I find along the way. I asked the person that made the comment about the variables. We don't want to do with statistics like other people do with statistics just to prove our point and not being really forthcoming with the stats. You know what I'm saying? We have to be honest with the stats. How are you going to take? You're going to take a DNA test to determine you're from Jamaica? You know what I mean? You're going to take a DNA test. It's not going to, they don't be like, oh, yes, and the DNA shows you're from Jamaica, because that's a transplant. Or you're from Brazil. We already know that's a transplant. So how are you going to determine the everyday person, the fact that the same people that you're saying you're not, there might be a possibility that 3 generations ago, that's where you were transplanted. So that's just my thoughts on the matter. Travis says, the way I understand that, she says, everyone is being lifted up about the ID, but when American people try to ID their group, it being viewed as divisive. The theme in itself is is self-identification. I think it really depends on where you are. I could see how, but then okay, let's look at community events. Okay, two things come to mind: the Olympics. In the Olympics, Queen T, no problem. You're gonna just I put the links in the box so you could definitely catch up. When you look at the Olympics, when you have melanated people running for the Olympics, they fly the American flag high and with pride. Usually, even in the American Olympics, when another team wins, if you check the cameraman, he still has the camera on the, even if the American may have come in second or third. And even if they're melanated, what comes first at that time is the country, right? So I see in certain spaces where this is allowed. So when it says American people, I would like to be like, where is this happening? Where is American people not allowed, or those who don't have another place that they were dropped off to, or that's within their remembrance for them to say, hey, I identify with that? Where is this conversation happening? For instance, I don't go to a carnival no more. I never really liked it, but because it was crazy. But in the Caribbean Carnival in New York, Brooklyn, where it's just like the biggest carnival, West Indian Day Parade, in you know what I'm saying, this side of the Atlantic, the America is represented. People come out there with their American flags amongst all of the other Caribbean flags. So like, I'm just saying it really depends on our perspective to say, where is this happening? Where is it happening? Because I'm not saying it's not happening. It's just probably just like, where is it happening? Chavez says, I agree. My family's from South Carolina. I'm from Gables, Florida, but my father's from South Carolina. Right. And I have a sister-in-law who's just digging in her history, and her family's from South Carolina. And come to find out, this is why I'm talking about real stuff, that she would fall under what people are saying is ADOS. But then when they dig a little further, based on the history that we just read, it's finding out that one of her grandparents came from the Caribbean. Because this was what was happening. When you read Alado Equiano, and some people argue about this, that, but when you read Alado Equiano, when he became a ship boy, where he was sailing on ships, and at one point he was in the Caribbean, and he was instrumental in helping them take slaves from one island to the next, from Montserrat to wherever it is, and they would trade people like that, like it was nothing. You would leave your family back on one island, and next thing you know, they're sending you to South Carolina, or they're sending you to Georgia. And now you're here, you know what I'm saying? And you know what I mean? You're like, well, where am I and where do I belong? Ultimately, he didn't feel like he belonged anywhere, and he wanted to go back to England. That's a good read. I believe, was it England he was from? Go sit down. No, that's a good read. But my point is, I would, just to tease it out a little more, like how this is gonna work. You know what I'm saying? How is it gonna work? Because from what I'm seeing, it's like people are like, from what I'm seeing, I'm not making this stuff up in the comment section. Let me take that to the comment section so y'all see I'm not tripping. Let me share my screen. It's like there's a pushback, but there's also the energy in which the discussion is being had as well. It's like what you're projecting and what someone is perceiving. And we have to be, you don't have to you're not going to be able to determine what everybody feels, but you do have to check to see, what am I pushing out there? Because these are some things to consider. And I always like to say, and then what? After you get what you say you're looking for, the thought processes that melanated people are taking from the Caribbean are taking your jobs. Where's the proof of this? You know what I mean? Are taking your scholarships. Where's the proof of this? Because the same article said, let me go to the article before I go to the comment section. The same article said that compared to mainland melanated people, those who come from the Caribbean are in more debt from school loans. Hold on. Because I read all the way through this jank. Hold up 1 second. Look at this one. This is what I'm saying. You can't just pull percentage of household owning stocks, IRA, and private annuity. We've already looked at this. US, melanated people, 10.8. Caribbean, 8.6. More than Caribbean is Puerto Rican at 12.7 and Cuban. So how does you see what I'm saying? Questions. It's just questions. Let me go down a little bit more. This is, again, these are just the graphs for the information they gave for the visuals out there. Percentage of households having financial assets by type or asset. So you have the red one being the homeland melanated and the green one being the Caribbean. In the IRA, you have the Caribbean less than the homeland. In stocks, you have the Caribbean less than the homeland. In the savings account, you have the Caribbean more than the homeland. And in checking account, you have the Caribbean more than the homeland. A lot of people from the Caribbean are sending money to their family back to wherever they came from. So they're saving money. There's also a lot of people from the Caribbean practice what we call community banking, which is partner draw, which they have amongst themselves, which is a community banking system where people pay into weekly, and then each week, each one person gets a whole sum of that money. This is something that many Caribbean people live off of. So when they're doing these numbers, are those things considered the cultural things that people still adhere to? So this is how people are able to get down payments for houses. I know people personally. This is not something I'm giving you hype on. This is how, because they're still practicing community or group economics. Whether or not your partner draw is $50 a week or your partner draw is $1,000 a week. There's some people who send their children to college off of this stuff, right? Concerning credit card, which would be, there's 47.24 and melanated is 42.1, right? Student loans. We have student loans, the odds of paying off college debt. I heard one talk about going to free college in Trinidad and then coming here and stealing jobs. I need more information on that. But South America, 30.2%, Caribbean melanated, 26.5% in debt off of college loans. And lower than that is 20.1%. When you jump down, it says the percentage of South American and Caribbean melanated households reporting student debt is roughly twice that of the European households. More troubling, US melanated reported high amounts of student debt, but low rates of degree attainment. This means they lack the labor market advantages conferred by bachelor degrees, but still carry the burden of student loan expenses. This is something to pull out. What's going on here? What's going on here from the time you're going to school? It says they lack the rate of degree attainment. Why? What that needs further research, but I'll continue. So to the thought that someone is coming on a free ride and they're not paying, I don't know where that thought is coming from. I don't know where that thought is coming from. Maybe I'm missing something. Well, there was something else I wanted to show. Look at the vehicle. Look at the vehicle. Melanated on continent and Caribbean. With houses, you have Caribbean people investing more in houses than what they're saying is melanated from here. And then you have, with vehicles, you have more melanated people from here investing in vehicles than you have Caribbeans. What's going on there? They speak about it. You know what I'm saying? The article could have went into more depth to find out why Caribbean people are foregoing to a larger degree a car than they will a house. And the article goes in to speak more about it. I say that to say there was much more in this article, and it just doesn't show that Caribbean so-called Black people are surpassing homeland melanated people on everything. And it also doesn't show that before this time, melanated people from the Caribbean didn't help to build the ground floor or the infrastructure of America. It doesn't show that. So those are my findings, preliminary, of course, preliminary findings. Correct. This is what I'm trying to find out, Queen T. We all originated from the continent and migrated, but this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to find out concerning this present conversation is how one is going to parse out who built this particular part of the diaspora and who did not. And whether or not one can determine the fact that because you came from a Caribbean island, that means that you did not help to build this part of the diaspora. That's unproven, is what I'm saying. So when I hear things like that, I'm like, okay, what are we using to base this on? So I definitely left the things in the box. I know I'm probably going to get some comments. As long as we keep it clean and respectable, it's all good. Okay, Tough Guy gave us, let's see. I'm going to check out the article. I'll check out the article. And once again, oh, that's one thing I wanted to go through. One more thing. It's just some of the comments. It may not be the intent, but it's appearing that this is what it's becoming, us against them. This is why you hear some people talking about a divide and conquer tactic. It's not a thought process to say that one should not go or seek to get what one thinks they are due, but it's to say the way in which one does it, how they go about it. The question after that is, and then what? You know what I'm saying? And then what? Because many things still remain the same. So the babies are coming for me. I would just say read the comment section, y'all. Read the comment section. How about that? Read the comment section and let me know your thoughts. Maybe I'm overdoing it. Maybe I'm doing too much Solonomics view from what I'm seeing, but I'm definitely seeing some tensions and some resentment and some indifference rising and some, things going on. And I think it's misdirected and misinformed if one is going to think that the totality, if you are Caribbean or if you are, I would say even more Caribbean than I would say the continent, because the continent is so far away that in many spaces they weren't present. But when you talk about the Caribbean, it's the same people. It's the same people in the sense of that we're taken back and forth from one spot to the next. It's like it was the second migration or the second forced migration. The same people who were in Virginia and South Carolina and on the coast were the same people who they pushed down into Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. That was a forced migration. That was the second forced migration with slavery after they depleted the eastern seaboard. And they could no longer, the soil was no longer profitable. And so they started to switch from tobacco to cotton, from tobacco and indigo to cotton. That's a history behind that. This is why they will say, if you act up, boy, I'm going to send you to where the sun don't shine and I'm going to ship you all the way down to Mississippi. You'll never see the light of day. Why? Because the government was giving away large portions of land for business, so-called men, to go down there and farm this virgin land down in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and all of these parts of the country. So it's the same people who was up here that they pushed down there. In the same way, it was the same people from the Caribbean who were dropped there that they pushed onto the mainland. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I think some of the aspects are good, but the finite details are not figured out. And that's understandable. We're not going to have everything all figured out all the time. In the meantime, you know what I'm saying? In the meantime, how we two criteria for eligibility for reparations in the U.S. At least one ancestor who was enslaved in the U.S. I'm waiting for the next one. And then how far back, if just us, if you got any information, how far back do you go? How far back do you go? And what do you do with the freedmen? What do you do with the freedmen who were here, but were never enslaved? But they were here. You know what I'm saying? Where's the paperwork to prove that the ancestor was enslaved? You know what I'm saying? How many people have that paperwork? How many people could have produced the paperwork that says your ancestor was enslaved? Like I said, I interviewed a brother on this channel, J.C. Hughes, and we actually read the narrative of his great-great-grandfather or many great-grandfather where it says Lewis Hughes, right? And we actually read the narrative here on this channel some years ago. But many people's grandparents didn't write a narrative, you know what I'm saying, or autobiography. So how does one go about that? Let me see. Justice says at least 10 years before enactment of reparations program, self-identification as Black, Negro, color, African American, Dr. William Sandy Doherty Jr. And that's who sets the criteria? Because to my understanding, this HR 40 is the proposal to study reparations. The proposal to study the reparations. So therefore, what are, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions. Like I said, it's intersecting with some of the study that I do. And that's why it has intrigued me. To me, they participate in the building, enabled or not. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. There's participation, but there's like, again, we just read, sister, and you can see the link in the box, that Barbadians incorporated the city. I don't even want to give the wrong city. Was it Carroll Gardens? In Miami. In Miami. So, yeah. Anywho. I just think that we're speaking as if it's all absolutes. The one thing I do know is that this country knows that there was damage done and persists to this day, and it must be repaired. That I agree with you with the latter part. This is why I'm like absolutes. I'm on you with that, Chavez. I'm like absolutes. Well, how did we get to the absolutes? That means we did the whole intensive study. You feel me? For me to say you over here and you over there, that means we had to have done the full study. That's why I'm like, if that be the case, where that? Well, I'm gonna open up this thing. If that be the case, where it's at, show, let me know. Because I like to do a little tippy tappy on the computer from time to time. I like to do the research. But like you said, the damage was done. Correct. It's like there was some damage, you send out the research appraiser, and they have to go out and assess the damage. Okay, where are the areas that the damage was done? This area, that area, this area. How are ways in which, what has been done in times past to look to alleviate this damage? We all agree something should be done and repayment is owed. And something should be done. I definitely agree something should be done. Now that's where people begin to disagree. In what capacity should it be done? And what efforts have been made in times past? And the way in which we are representing history, you know what I'm saying? For our benefit. It's like we can have justice, or we could get vigilante justice. You know what I mean? And we'd be like, yo, we about to change the narrative. In the meantime, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what did you just say? You know what I mean? Because sometimes we can get tunnel vision like that. We want something and we're not realizing in our efforts to get this, what we did over here. And all I'm saying is, more research. Anywho, thank everybody for tuning in. The links are in the box. I'll be back. I still haven't come back. I heard another incorrect narrative that I'm going to come back. It's been on my list to talk about. So I'm going to come back and talk about that one next time. But this one just jumped up, so I shared the thoughts. With that said, the links are in the box. Again, share the word. Somebody told me the other day, you need more subscribers. It's like those who come. You know what I mean? Those who share. I'm going to put the Soul Center links in the box for anyone who wants information on flushing out toxic people, on soul improvement. If you want to going through your own issues and your own trauma, that's when you talk about repairing. There's things that others can do for us, and there's things we have to do for ourselves. And prayerfully, we're doing the things that we have to do for ourselves. Because if it's like, I'll leave you with this. They say when you have been in an abusive space or relationship, right? When you get to the point where your well-being is determined by whether or not that person says sorry, you may never get that sorry. You may never get that apology. Is that going to stop you from Is that going to stop you from living? Is that going to stop you from, you understand what I'm saying? So the things that we can do, we should do for ourselves. Because after you get, say you get a check cut tomorrow, just like your tax money hit, boom, you get a check. Everybody get $250,000. You got a check. Now what? Now what? What's your next course of action? What's the plan? Who do you trust? You know what I'm saying? Are you going to collaboratively effort? Are you going to put your money together? Are you going to start to fight and squabble? Are you going to break apart? Because this is historically what has happened. You see what I'm saying? To be able to trust someone with your capital to say that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. We have issues in that area. BT, I feel all melanated people need some reparations, whether it be to Caribbean people or the continent. All melanated people have been affected. You like the small group? Yeah, because sometimes you're welcome. Always a pleasure. Sometimes, America, when you look at CARICOM did what I was showing you yesterday. CARICOM put it all together. And if I'm not mistaken, they went to England. CARICOM did it. We'll come back and look at what CARICOM did it. It's like South America. It's the Caribbean islands. And they did the whole thing. 10-point reparations plan. I was following it too. I mean, they rolled up on them dudes. It was on the news in England. And one of the things that I was watching, like I said, I saw England was like, they did the whole, man, please. You know what I mean? And then they had this whole thing where the dude went into all of these like dusty storerooms and found all of these old land deeds and found that when they were like, yo, you got to abolish slavery in the colonies, they were like, yo, well, you got to buy us out. And then what had to happen was there was an inventory by a lot of the slave owners who was like, yo, I got 2 slaves and such, and I lost this amount of income. And they actually took monies and paid the slave owners. That's what they did. And so they're like, what you talking about? We ain't got no money for you. They turned around and was like, the money is in the infrastructure of England. This is what built England. You know what I mean? So these are some of the things that, not to say that, this is what America is going to say, but again, we looked at what happened on that side, and that's what they came to. Now, I don't know what's going on of recent. That was the last update, but I'll go over there and see what's going on. But them dudes was like, we ain't got no money out yet. I was like, oh, wow, okay. And the same thing happened with the French in Haiti, where the French, I said this before, you can look it up. That's why Haiti became the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, because Haiti owned reparations to the French for their freedom. And we'll go out with Queen T. Let's start with ourselves. Hallelujah. Power to the people. And children, mental repair, working together, building African-based schools and Black businesses. We have to learn the ground up. I know people say in these places and that places, but if you don't have the people, if you fight for all of this and you don't have the people who's willing to go out there and do it, you know what I'm saying? If you don't have that day-to-day, that raising up that next generation to make sure that they're okay and the morals and values are still within them, sometimes we're trying to die for the collective and forget who's right in front of us. And so when we work that hard and sweat, because you have to pass the baton and you haven't prepared them, when you turn around, they're going to be like, I don't want that. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, what? So we have to also be careful of this. We have to be careful that what all that we're pushing and fighting for, as Queen T is saying, that we don't forget what we are responsible for immediately, which is the baby who's behind me breathing on my neck right now. All right, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and go. Say bye to the people. Bye. Bye. Say bye. All right, the baby said bye. All right, everybody.